I never expected to become the main character in a neighborhood scandal, but then again, I never expected my pool to turn into a personal spa for the queen of the HOA. It was a Tuesday afternoon in June, the kind of hot where the pavement sizzles and the air feels like soup. I had just wrapped up an early work call and decided to head home early, craving nothing more than a quiet float in my backyard oasis. But as I turned the corner of my driveway, something felt off. The side gate was ajar. Music, jazz of all things, was drifting from my backyard, and laughter, not mine. I approached slowly, confusion giving way to dread, and there she was. Karen Hill, HOA board member, self-declared enforcer of community standards, and the last person I ever wanted near my chlorine. She was reclining on one of my inflatable lounges like she owned the place, drink in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara. Around her were 3 other people, all mid-50s, HOA regulars with that smug air of untouchable authority. They were sipping rosé, feet in my pool, crumbs of what looked like brie and crackers on my patio table. My patio table. I stood there, blinking, trying to process what the hell I was seeing. Karen glanced at me, completely unbothered, and smiled. "Oh, hi, Tyler," she said like we were old friends. "We figured you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it anyway." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She waved toward the speaker, music swelling. "Chill and swim Tuesdays," she added with a wink. "It's kind of a new community thing." Community thing? My pool? Without my permission? I was so stunned I didn't say a word. Not then. Not when they finally got up and left hours later, leaving wet footprints, empty wine glasses, and a floating napkin that said, "Property of Clearview Pines, HOA." But that night, I checked my email, and that's when I lost it. A neighborhood bulletin had gone out. In it, Karen had publicly thanked me for generously offering my backyard for weekly HOA social gatherings, calling it a wonderful example of community spirit. There was even a RSVP link for future events. My hands shook as I read it. I hadn't offered anything, but I was about to take it all back with glitter. At first I tried to convince myself it was a one-time thing, a weird misunderstanding or maybe some kind of miscommunication blown out of proportion, but then it happened again and again. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, I'd come home to find wet footprints on the patio, crumbs on the table, a faint hint of coconut sunscreen in the air, and once, no joke, a single high heel abandoned near the pool ladder like some twisted suburban Cinderella scene. I checked my security camera footage and sure enough, there she was. Karen, strolling in through my unlocked side gate like it was a public park entrance. She had a Bluetooth speaker, a different wine each week, and a rotating cast of smug HOA cronies trailing behind her. They used my pool like it was a community amenity, not someone's private sanctuary. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh when I saw one of them trying to plug in a slow cooker next to my pool pump. So I confronted her. Calmly at first, I walked over one morning while she was wiping down her sunglasses with one of my guest towels and said, "Karen, this isn't okay. This is my property. You can't just come in here whenever you want." She didn't even flinch. She actually laughed and said, "Oh, relax, Tyler. It's not like we're hurting anything. You should be proud your space is bringing the neighborhood together." Then she leaned in, lowered her voice like we were co-conspirators and added, "Besides, your fence barely meets HOA standards. If you really wanted privacy, you should have built something sturdier." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some entitled neighbor crossing a line. This was a calculated power move, and she wasn't stopping. Days later, I received a formal warning from the HOA citing me for unneighborly behavior, fence maintenance concerns, and get this, non-compliance with community engagement expectations. It was signed by Karen. Of course it was. My blood boiled. She was using her position on the HOA board as a weapon, disguising trespassing as outreach and turning my refusal to host unauthorized parties into a punishable offense. The kicker? She had apparently submitted photos of my backyard as evidence of underutilized communal potential, which, according to her, justified informal shared use under Section 4C of the HOA's vague and poorly worded engagement policy. It was laughable if it weren't so infuriating. I wasn't just being invaded, I was being gaslit in full daylight. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't about the pool anymore. This was about control, about one woman with a clipboard and too much Chardonnay playing dictator behind a picket fence. But she had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I'd play nice. She assumed I wouldn't push back. She assumed wrong. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I prefer logic over conflict, facts over feelings. But something about Karen Hill strutting through my backyard with a wine glass and a smirk flipped a switch in me. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about principle. She had twisted the rules, manipulated the system, and weaponized a half-baked HOA charter to turn my sanctuary into her personal social club. And after that last email where she thanked me again for my ongoing support of the weekly poolside fellowship, I knew I had to respond. Not with more emails, not with a lawyer, but with glitter. Not just any glitter. I spent 2 nights researching industrial-grade glitter used in outdoor performances, the kind that doesn't dissolve, clings to everything, and turns human beings into disco balls for days. Harmless, non-toxic, technically safe, but impossible to hide. My plan came together in 3 phases. Phase 1, distraction. I sent out a fake out-of-office message to the HOA mailing list, casually mentioning that I'd be out of town for a long weekend. Then I parked my car 2 blocks away and blacked out the windows, giving the illusion that the house was empty. Karen would see that as an open invitation. Phase 2, deployment. I modified the filter intake system of my pool, something most people don't even know you can do with a hidden release canister. A simple Bluetooth trigger would activate the pool jets and release the glitter directly into the circulation system. I tested it once at 2 a.m. The water shimmered like a Vegas fountain show. Perfect. Then I added one last touch, a remote motion sensor wired to my outdoor camera that would ping me the moment someone stepped through the side gate. Phase 3, the bait. I left a handwritten sign on the patio table that read, "Hosting again soon. Bring your floaties," with a winking face. It was bait so obvious, it was practically an insult. I even left a half-inflated flamingo raft near the pool to seal the illusion. And then I waited. Sunday afternoon, just after 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the live feed, and there she was, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and dragging a cooler behind her like she was attending Coachella. Karen, and not alone, 2 of her friends from the board, plus a man I didn't recognize, shirtless, holding a Bluetooth speaker and already drinking. They strutted in like they owned the deed. Karen actually tossed her towel over one of my chairs and said loud enough for the mic to catch it, "Looks like Tyler finally learned to share." The second they all eased into the water, I tapped the trigger. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then the pool jets kicked on and a glitter explosion erupted beneath the surface. It was subtle at first, just a sparkle in the sunlight. Then the water turned into a shimmering cloud of gold, silver, and hot pink. Karen noticed it before anyone else. She stood up in the shallow end and gasped. "What the hell is this? Is this glitter?" Someone shrieked behind her. One of the board members began slapping at their skin. "It's not coming off. Oh my God, it's in my hair." Karen's sun hat floated away, catching light like a mirror ball. The shirtless guy bolted out of the pool and tripped over the flamingo raft, landing hard on the concrete and smearing glitter across my patio. Karen scrambled out next, blinking, coughing, dripping with sparkle and rage. She screamed my name like it was a curse word. "Tyler." I stepped out onto the deck, holding my phone, recording everything. "You said you were gone," she yelled, flailing. I smiled. Must have been an error in the HOA newsletter. You know how misinformation spreads. Her face turned beet red under the shimmer. "This is vandalism. You'll pay for this," I shrugged. "Oh, I don't think so. I've got footage of you trespassing. Again. And you know, Karen, it's really hard to play the victim when you're sparkling like a New Year's Eve parade float." She lunged toward the gate, but not before slipping and leaving a glitter streak across the fence. One of her friends groaned, "This stuff is going to be in my carpet for months." I didn't respond. I just let the camera roll. Operation Glitterfall was a success, and it was only the beginning. The glitter didn't just stick. It embedded itself. It clung to skin, hair, eyelashes, pool floats, speaker grills, and most satisfyingly, to Karen Hill's ego. She stormed out of my backyard looking like a disgraced pageant queen who just lost the crown in a glitter tornado. But it wasn't over. Not even close. I thought the prank would be the final blow, a sparkly exclamation mark at the end of this ridiculous saga, but instead it lit a fuse. The next morning I woke up to an official HOA violation letter taped to my front door. No envelope, no stamp, just a piece of paper aggressively duct-taped right below the peephole like some sort of passive-aggressive ransom note. The accusation? Improper chemical usage in community-adjacent water features. In parentheses, it specified glitter. A second bullet point claimed noise ordinance violations due to unauthorized sound-emitting devices, which I could only assume referred to Karen's Bluetooth speaker. The last line warned of further disciplinary action, including fines and possible escalation to legal authorities. It was signed, of course, by Karen Hill. My jaw actually dropped. The audacity was almost admirable. She had the nerve to trespass into my yard, throw pool parties in my private space, get blasted with environmentally safe glitter of her own causing, and then turn around and accuse me of misconduct. But she had done more than just throw a tantrum. She had filed the violation with the full HOA board, many of whom were her longtime cronies. That meant I needed to act fast before her narrative gained traction. So I compiled everything, all the footage, every instance of Karen and her entourage entering my property without permission. The emails, the fake RSVPs, the glitter incident itself from 3 different angles. I organized them into a presentation so airtight it could have been used in a courtroom. Then I printed out the HOA bylaws, highlighted every section that she'd violated, and cross-referenced them with time steps from my security feed. But the cherry on top? I dug deeper, way deeper. I had suspected Karen was misusing her position on the board for a while, so I started asking around carefully. A few neighbors were hesitant at first, but once I mentioned the glitter incident, their eyes lit up. One woman, Marla from across the street, admitted Karen fined her $200 last year for inconsistent seasonal decor. Another guy, Tony, said Karen cited him for a non-approved grill color, beige, not HOA gray. Both of them had stories, and both were happy to share copies of the violation letters Karen had signed. The pattern was unmistakable: arbitrary enforcement, selective punishment, and a personal vendetta masquerading as governance. The glitter had shaken something loose. People were done being polite. So I did the unthinkable. I requested to speak at the next HOA board meeting, and to everyone's surprise, including mine, they said yes. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, the same space where Karen once hosted wine appreciation evenings, which were really just gossip circles with charcuterie. I walked in wearing jeans and a navy polo, laptop under one arm and a manila folder stuffed with receipts under the other. Karen was already there, seated in the center like a queen at her court, flanked by her loyal inner circle. The moment she saw me, she smirked and crossed her arms. "Let's keep this brief, Tyler," she said. I just nodded and plugged my laptop into the projector. The title slide popped up: Operation Glitterfall and the Curious Case of Community Mismanagement. I started with the obvious. Footage of Karen entering my backyard repeatedly without permission. The wine parties, the cooler, the flamingo raft, the glitter blast in full high-definition glory. The room chuckled at that, even a few board members. Karen squirmed. Then I showed the letters she had sent to me and to other neighbors. The citations, the contradictions, the inconsistencies. I followed that with screenshots of her newsletter claiming I had offered up my pool, alongside video of me directly confronting her as she shrugged it off. Then came the hard evidence. HOA funds being used for community snacks that somehow matched up with wine store receipts. Landscaping fees submitted for properties that weren't even communal, including, surprise, Karen's own front yard. A few board members leaned forward. Karen began shifting in her seat, and then, with perfect timing, I handed out a one-page printout to each board member detailing the violations I believed warranted investigation. The room fell silent. Karen stood, hands trembling. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "You glitter-bombed me." "You're a vandal?" I kept my voice calm. "Karen, you've trespassed, falsified community events, misused funds, and weaponized your authority against neighbors who disagreed with you," I added. "The glitter wasn't vandalism. It was the only language you seemed to understand." That line landed hard. Murmurs rippled through the room. One of the board members, an older gentleman named Frank, cleared his throat and said, "I think it's time we discussed leadership realignment." Karen looked stunned, then furious, then stunned again. Within the next 20 minutes, the board voted to suspend Karen's privileges pending an internal audit. Her role as communications chair was stripped immediately. A special subcommittee was formed to review every complaint filed under her signature. She stormed out of the room like a character in a reality show reunion episode, leaving behind nothing but tension and the faintest sparkle on the back of her chair from the glitter that just would not quit. I walked out of that clubhouse to polite applause and 2 neighbors offering to buy me dinner. One of them was Marla, who whispered, "I always knew she was shady, but I didn't have proof. Thank you for standing up." I smiled and told her the truth. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It never was. That glitter bomb didn't just out Karen. It opened the floodgates, and now that the flood had started, I wasn't about to stop it. I thought that once Karen was removed from her position, things would finally quiet down. I imagined peaceful evenings by my pool, no more surprise swim-ins or glitter-covered drama queens. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days after the HOA board suspended her, I came home to find a city code enforcement officer waiting at my front porch. He had a clipboard, a badge, and a look that said someone had filed one hell of a complaint. According to him, I had been anonymously reported for multiple violations: improper water drainage, unapproved lighting installations, and this one made me laugh out loud, unsafe landscaping due to excessive decorative gravel. It was a kitchen sink complaint, the kind designed to overwhelm, annoy, and maybe scare someone into submission. But I had been preparing for this. I invited him in, offered a cup of coffee, and handed over permits, inspection records, receipts, and city-approved schematics for every last feature on my property. After an hour-long walkthrough, the officer shook his head, smiled, and said, "You're clear, but I'm flagging this report as a suspected case of malicious misuse of city resources. If you ever find out who filed it, let me know." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Oh, I know exactly who filed it." And just like that, phase 2 began. Remember the water hose Karen used to sneak from my side yard into hers? Turns out she had illegally tapped into my irrigation line months ago to keep her lawn lush during drought restrictions. I had photographic proof, timestamps, and even drone footage. Yes, I got a drone. So I hired a licensed plumber to reroute the irrigation line just slightly, nothing permanent or dangerous, but enough to redirect a harmless trickle of gray water runoff, think mildly stinky flower bed bathwater, straight into Karen's sprinkler system. I timed it perfectly. Tuesday, 3:15 p.m., just as her automated sprinklers kicked on to water her award-winning roses. Except this time, they didn't get clean water. They got hit with a stream that smelled faintly of sulfur and dish soap. Within minutes, her front yard turned into a scene from a garden horror movie. The roses wilted under the chemical surprise. The grass went patchy. Karen came running out of the house in flip-flops, screaming into her phone while flailing a garden hose like she was trying to fight off a snake. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. A few even recorded the scene. And me? I sat on my deck with a cold drink, sunglasses on, watching it all unfold like the end of a revenge thriller. Karen tried calling me. I let it go to voicemail. She tried texting. I left it on red. She even came to my front door once, banged 3 times, and yelled, "We need to talk." I just turned the volume up on my speakers and let Sinatra drown her out. The power shift had happened. People weren't scared of her anymore. The HOA board had launched a full audit. Neighbors were finally speaking up, and Karen, once untouchable, was now the cautionary tale of Clearview Pines. But here's the twist no one saw coming. I didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. Sitting by my glitter-free pool, watching the sun dip behind the fence, I felt something different. Something heavier, responsibility. I hadn't just exposed Karen, I'd cracked open something bigger, a culture of silence, fear, and unchecked pettiness that had ruled this neighborhood for years, and now people were looking to me, not just as the guy who glitter-bombed a tyrant, but as someone who could help them stand up, speak out, and maybe, just maybe, fix what was broken. The prank had started the fire, but the fallout? That was where the real change began. It started with a knock on my door, soft and hesitant. I opened it to find Gladys, the elderly widow who lived 3 houses down, holding a manila folder that looked like it had survived a decade in a basement. Her eyes twinkled as she handed it to me and said, "I thought you might want this." Inside were handwritten notes, printed emails, copies of every HOA meeting agenda and violation letter Karen had ever sent out, meticulously archived, color-coded, annotated like a case file from a true crime documentary. I flipped through pages that exposed years of abuse, fines for Christmas lights being too enthusiastic, threats for overwatering, and penalties for using non-HOA-approved patio umbrellas. Gladys had kept it all, waiting for someone to stand up. That someone, apparently, was now me, and she wasn't alone. Over the next few days, neighbors began reaching out, quiet at first, then louder. A father who had been cited for his kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk, a single mom fined for having a trampoline, a retired couple forced to repaint their house because their shade of beige was allegedly too cheerful. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a scar, and now they had a spark. The community that had once whispered behind blinds now gathered openly. We formed a group, unofficial at first, just folding chairs on my lawn and coffee and travel mugs, but it grew, fast. We called ourselves the Clearview Coalition. Our mission was simple: transparency, fairness, accountability. We submitted a petition to the HOA board calling for an emergency town hall. We demanded a full financial audit and a vote to reform the bylaws, and shockingly, the board listened. Maybe it was the growing crowd, maybe it was the fear of being the next viral glitter story, but the pressure worked. The town hall was set. When the night came, the community center was packed wall to wall. Neighbors who had never made eye contact were now sitting shoulder to shoulder, some holding manila folders like Gladys, others just holding each other's hands. I took the floor after Harold, one of the few decent board members left, gave a short introduction. I didn't prepare a speech. Doesn't need to. I just told the truth. I told them how it started, with a woman trespassing into my pool like it was her kingdom, how it turned into retaliation, manipulation, abuse of power, but more importantly, I told them how it wasn't just about me. It was about every person in that room who had been silenced, fined, or pushed to the edge by a system built on intimidation and arrogance. I showed them Karen's misuse of funds, her fake newsletter announcements, her retaliatory complaints. I projected screenshots, read quotes, played audio, and then I stepped aside. Gladys spoke, so did Marla. Even Tony, the grill collar guy, shared his story. One by one, voices that had been quiet for years rose up. There were gasps, tears, even laughter when someone mentioned the glitter again. The vote to remove Karen permanently passed unanimously. The board approved the audit, agreed to open meetings to the public, and promised to draft new bylaws with input from the community. The dam had finally broken. Karen, who had tried to walk in mid-meeting, froze at the door as the applause thundered. Then she turned and walked away. No speech, no grand exit, just a shimmer of residual glitter still caught in her hair under the fluorescent lights. And for the first time in a long time, Clearview Pines felt like a real neighborhood again, not because it was perfect, but because people finally felt seen, heard, and free to breathe without fear of citations. We weren't just neighbors anymore, we were a community. And we weren't going back. A few weeks after the town hall, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photo of Karen standing in front of a rundown house in a nearby suburb, holding a garden hose and glaring at a flower bed of half-dead roses. Scrawled in marker across the bottom were the words, "Her reign is truly over." I laughed, not out of spite, but out of sheer disbelief that this bizarre, glitter-soaked chapter of my life had somehow turned into a movement. What started as a petty prank to reclaim my pool had grown into something much bigger, something real. Clearview Pines wasn't the same anymore, and thank God for that. The new bylaws we drafted were passed by an overwhelming majority. They included term limits, mandatory transparency for all spending, and a consent clause that ensured HOA authority could never extend to private properties without explicit agreement. We created a digital portal where residents could view budgets, file complaints, and track HOA decisions in real time. Evan, the tech-savvy teen from down the block, built it herself in exchange for unlimited pizza and the right to name it the Glitter Board. I even ended up as part of the oversight committee, which I swore I'd never do, but something about seeing my neighbors finally stand tall made me realize how important it was to keep that momentum going. Then came the call from a local civic group. They had heard about our reforms, seen the glitter video, and wanted me to speak at their municipal ethics summit. I almost declined. I'm not a politician, I'm just a guy who rigged his pool filter with industrial sparkle powder. But Harold, now the official HOA president again, told me, "You turned your backyard into a battleground for fairness. That counts." So I went. I told them the truth. I told them how one act of trespass had unraveled a web of control and corruption, how one prank, backed by evidence and persistence, gave people the courage to speak. I didn't call myself a hero. I didn't need to, because the real power had always been in the people who stood up, one voice at a time. Back home, the air felt lighter. Kids played on chalk-covered sidewalks without fear. Gladys hosted tea on her porch with her ridiculous wind chimes jingling proudly. And my pool? Still sparkling, still private, except now, sometimes, neighbors stopped by not to trespass, but to say thanks, to ask for advice, to talk about bylaws and balance and how to keep power in check. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted peace. But it turns out peace sometimes wears armor made of glitter. And now that I had tasted what real community looked like, I wasn't about to let it fade. Not on my watch. Not in my yard.